The founder of the treasure hoarders was a Hyperborean prince. Rerir was the advisor to the cryo archon. And the Tsaritsa is trying to take down the devil? Yes, it's that kind of video. With the phenomenal story setup in these first 2 chapters and the deep politics of the region, you may be a bit confused by everything going on, or just want to dive deeper. So, the Unlikely Genshin Gamer is here to break it right down into the kind of narrative befitting such an intricate story. One that takes all the detective work out of it so you can enjoy. And you might be surprised by what you learn. When I'm done, everything will make perfect sense and will enrich the region even more. Settle down and get comfortable, and we'll begin with the very relevant history of Nodkrai. Also, for those of you who like to check back on the origin of my claims, I'm debuting a new reference system to provide sources without impacting the story experience. Keep an eye on the lower right corner of the video, and whenever I have a relevant source for a piece of information, the icon of the item whose description I was pulling from, or the quest symbol that's relevant will appear. That way, talking about the sources too much won't bloat the video or make the story complicated, but you guys can still get your references. Hope you enjoy. Now, the root of almost everything about Nodkrai begins with the ancient nation of Hyperborea and the 3 moons that used to shine on Teyvat. The history of that place is coming together in bits and pieces, and what we do know so far is some sneaky stuff that has huge implications. In Greek mythology, Hyperborea was a place to the far north that represented the ultimate idyllic nation, the perfect place to live without pain or suffering. And if the name reminds you of Boreas the wolf, you're not wrong. The original old wolf, who became the god of the north wind near Mondstadt, gained his power up there after encountering a singing angel in one of the ruined palaces of Hyperborea. Teyvat's Hyperborea was a highly advanced nation to the far north that existed in the time between when the dragon sovereigns were subdued by the primordial one, but before Nibelung, the dragon king, came back from his journey off in space to smash up the world. During that time, the 3 moon sisters that Nibelung made to oversee the world for him, Aria, Sonnet, and Canon, were still alive, although they had switched sides to obey the primordial one instead. The messengers of these sisters, called moon maidens or angels, carried messages back and forth from the moon goddesses to the people and were very powerful indeed, though still subject to the will of the primordial one. That place was known as the glorious nation of white and gold, and it's very likely that Hyperborea and Enkanomiya were the same people. Both areas are inspired by Greek culture and with Greek names. Hyperborea is directly Greek, and before Enkanomiya was ruled by the Inazuman serpent or Abashi, its people and systems had Greek names as well. Plus, the ruins look exactly the same. Even the music of each area has hints of Greek inspiration. Just listen to Hisi Island music compared to Nasha Town's, and then listen to Enkanomiya's. So, the event that knocked Enkanomiya into the Dark Sea is likely the same one I'm about to explain. Hyperborea became even more noteworthy when the chief angel and her husband began to personally oversee its development. Thanks to hymns of the far north, we now know that her name was Koitar, and her husband was Seutervoinen, the young man who was influenced by the mysterious Voyager. Some of you may remember that the Voyager I'm talking about was a drifting, bodiless mind from somewhere else in the universe who, thousands of years ago, happened upon Nibelung, the Dragon King, and his little world of Teyvat before the primordial one stole it. Impressed by Nibelung's will and nobility, the Voyager vowed to come back and check on him and his world after he refused to leave with her to journey amongst the stars. But when she did return, and found him missing with new bosses in town, she instead illegally entered the planet and installed herself in a young man of Hyperborea. Now we know his name was Seutervoinen. Possessed Seutervoinen led the people of Hyperborea to consider a train of thought that was more, let's say, free-thinking than they were normally allowed. And eventually, he took his newfound knowledge of the world outside of the false sky to the first angel, Koitar. Beneath the great silver tree, deep underground, he poured out all kinds of secrets to her and vowed to lend her all his aid in rebelling against the unfair heavenly principles. She fell in love with the wise, starry-eyed youth, and together they decided to do just that. This is where things begin to get pretty interesting, because one of the things they did together was teach the people of Hyperborea how to make the Fae. Yes, the people of Hyperborea were taught how to spin moonlight into a powerful race which Flins hails from, and who, at least in the past, dominantly ruled Snezhnaya. Think of the Hydro Archon making Oceanid people, but far more powerful. The Fae filled the royal court and positions of power, partying and gossiping away the days, including Kiril Chudamirovich Flins, by the way. And the king of Snezhnaya, Bel-Yisar, was said to be the king of the Fae. The powerful, shape-shifting Fae were part of a grand plan of rebellion aimed at creating something perfect. You see, Koitar and Seutervoinen dreamed of facilitating a glorious break from the need to worship the heavenly principles, and they believed in the creation of a perfect being that could merge with the world. Someone who could wield Kuvaki, which is the power of the moons, with absolute ease. And that then the power of humanity would truly rival any deity, and they could share the heavens with them without consequence. This eventually became the prophecy of the sacred Heir, which the early Frostmoon Scions both lived and died by. At the same time, Seutervoinen, now known as the Apostle of the Far North, utilized the knowledge of astonishingly advanced mechanics and technology from the Voyager in his head to help the Fae forging process and to design and create miraculous machines, like the subatomic assembling mass energy patterning orb, also known as the SAMPO mill. A machine that could transmute matter into an endless supply of gold, grain, or even energy. Remember that name, because that device, which was the most remarkable one still around after the destruction of Hyperborea, became the subject of many a plot, and may still become part of the present-day Nodkrai conflict. Seutervoinen also saw to the construction of a massive show-stopping tower, an audacious statement in the City of Gold. But their misbehaving did not go unnoticed. In the end, such wild illusions and ambitions were brought down from the heavens, and with them fell deep blue crystal spikes. The Fae shrieked as they turned into icy silver mist, and in the space of a single night, the splendor of the Golden City was ruined by frost-laden winds. The glorious golden tower fell like a fig tree. Across the frozen northern plain, from the holy citadel to the ancient capital, dark blue crystal nails annihilated every last city with even the most minuscule sign of life. The once praised apostle and the god's first messenger both vanished in the catastrophe. The traitorous envoy was stripped of both name and form, and from that moment onward, a curse fell upon her kin. If they dared gaze into another's eyes, and to one alone offer the love that was meant for all, then not only would their divine beauty crumble into the wind, but their mind would fall to dust, until from the fallen one's remains a Seelie would rise, forever drifting in search of fading memories to consume. Those who survived by grace of being nowhere near the cities at the time could only cling to life amidst the freezing wind and snow. With no refuge left to them, they simply waited for destruction to find them in the hollow dark. These were the ancestors of the Frostmoon Scions, the very few survivors of the destruction of Hyperborea. This was also the year that Nibelung came back to find his creations had sided with the usurper, and in the war between both descenders, as Lauma tells us in the quest, the eternal and iridescent moon goddesses were killed, and their palaces, which were the moons, were destroyed. This was called the Funerary Year, the year that Hyperborea, Enkanomiya, and the moons all fell. A lot of the moon fragments rained down on the land that would become known as Nodkrai, infusing the area with Kuvaki, and even Aria, the eternal moon goddess's moon marrow, basically her gnosis, landed in the area as well. Apparently, the lone frost moon goddess took pity on the displaced humans who had survived Heaven's fury and extended to them silver threads of moonlight to lead them out of the frigid cold down to the Kuvaki-laden lands of Nodkrai to the south. Therefore, those displaced Hyperboreans began to call themselves the Frostmoon Scions, thankful for her aid. They also begged her to give them a gift that would set them apart from others. After all, the wondrous silver tree that they used to fashion their crowns from was utterly destroyed, just like the matching one in Dragonspine. So, just before she died, wasted away by grief, she granted them antlers of spun moonlight, and those of the people nowadays whose blood most resembled their Hyperborean ancestors would express them clearly from birth, just like moonchanter Lauma. Who could have known that Koitar's promise of a sacred king who would lead humanity to the stars would grow into a poisonous, bloody doctrine amongst the Frostmoon Scions that nearly made them extinct? The Frostmoon Scions, until 500 years ago, held to the belief that the purifying of the extremely rare Hyperborean blood was now the entire point of their existence. Nothing was more important than producing the holy woman who could give birth to this sacred heir, especially now that the Fae-producing methods were gone. Archpriestesses of the highest order would carefully matchmake to align partners with the most strongly expressed genes, while carefully cataloging generations to avoid the dreadful consequences of inbreeding. Almost no one married for love, and marriage of outsiders was strictly forbidden. They were taught that were they just to endure this for the sake of their future generations, Elysium would be within grasp. This sacred heir was also destined to revive the SAMPO mill. Seutervoinen's epic machine was one of the few that survived the annihilation event, but it didn't work anymore, and no one who knew how to repair it had survived. And you couldn't have an Elysium without endless supplies now, could you? Everything, and I mean everything, was riding on this unborn child. The Sacred Heir Project, as it was called, continued for hundreds of years, until scandal struck in the last few years leading up to the Cataclysm. That scandal catapulted the entire region of Nodkrai into what we know it to be now. Allow me to introduce a new cast for this section of the story. Reed Miller, the dashingly handsome thief who founded the treasure hoarders of today. His best friend and high-ranking Snezhnayan noble, Solovey, founder of the Lightkeepers. Wicked Archpriestess Lovia and her grandchildren, twins Alia and Aila. And Rotwang, the Conrian scholar who became the most crooked and most trusted advisor in the royal court of Snezhnaya, who I think could possibly be Rerir. Before I can dive into the deeds of Archpriestess Lovia and how she drove her granddaughter to drastically reform the Frostmoon Scions, we have to go down into Conria, where a young scholar was just about to become an earth-changing fanatic. Rotwang was a novice monk of Conria, who, like others of the time, was consumed with trying to find out everything there was to know about the sky and stars. Sometimes these monks would glimpse strange phenomena out there because of Conria's unique location, and they were obsessed with finding out what the truth of it all was. When Rotwang accidentally uncovered the sign of Aposha, the young monk fell headfirst into full-blown fanaticism over the abyss. Of course, the Eclipse dynasty of the time was unlike its predecessor, the Crimson Moon worshippers. They were interested in mechanical and technological development. Rotwang's work in astronomy and the abyss were punishable offenses. He was sentenced to have his half-blooded behind deposited on the surface so he could become a mindless hilichurl, a common sentence in the kingdom. However, when Rotwang glimpsed the sun for the first time in his life with the rest of that batch of prisoners, he alone remained perfectly fine. With this new lease on life, he vowed to fulfill his wish to peel back the false sky and enter the true Elysium, the pitch-black abyss. And nothing was going to get in his way. He traveled the entire world taking in all the information he could until he wormed his way into the court of the Tsar of Snezhnaya. Just a few years before, the Tsar had ordered that the borderlands of the nation, Nodkrai, way out on the outskirts of the great snowfields, be developed and made use of. Not long after, Rotwang, now known as Rotwang the Mad Monk, seemed to have discovered that the gate to the abyss was located there as well. Being the Tsar's closest advisor, something that annoyed the Fey nobles, the Mad Monk knew that the Tsar's plans for Nodkrai's development hid a deeper meaning. In fact, it seems he had suggested it, but only to forward his own goals. He didn't care about glory when the abyss was within reach. When the Tsar eventually sent him to Nodkrai to find and steal the SAMPO mill, he saw an opportunity to make his move. Now, you may have realized by now, but Rotwang must have been the charismatic type. That's why he was able to fool the royals of Snezhnaya, and he was able to fool Lovia, the archpriestess of the Frostmoon Scions, as well. He was her accomplice in some shady dealings, including trying to secretly rouse the SAMPO mill so they could get on with creating this Elysium. He was a double agent for the Scions and the Tsar, while really only serving himself. Lovia eventually called on him as a fixer for a most dire problem, which backfired. After all these hundreds and hundreds of years, finally, a woman of sufficient purity had been born. Finally, salvation was within grasp. Only for that woman, who remains unnamed as of yet, to run off with another man instead of her ordained match, forsaking her people for love. Lovia was furious, commissioning Rotwang to track down the woman and bring her back. Although courteous greeting was the lie that was spread, he knew that Lovia meant to retrieve her by any means necessary. He made sure to have her husband killed, the Snezhnayan officer who had smitten her so. But when she saw her love's dead body, rather than risk capture, she slit her own throat and took the hope for an heir with her. Rotwang wrote back to tell Lovia the unfortunate news, and Lovia, mad with desperation, turned to her own granddaughters, the next purest line for hope. But because they were nowhere near the refinement that that holy lady had been, and because Lovia was sick and tired of waiting for things to happen, she hatched a dark plan to purify the children's blood by force. It's not made clear what she did to them, but it definitely included blood, and a lot of it. My theory is that she was literally bloodletting them, while adding blood from other Hyperboreans together in them to concentrate it. Whatever it is that she did, it was torture to the twins. The tattered book in the sanctum of the Oathbearer is the one book the two sisters would read and cherish while promising to never leave each other. Of course, that promise was eventually broken. Aila would grow up to reject all of this and kill Lovia once and for all, while her older sister, Alia, would eventually run away to escape the torment. Now things get pretty messy right here, and we don't know the exact timeline of events yet. But the stories written about national thieving hero Reed Miller and certain item descriptions paint a very interesting picture of what happened next. You see, at the same time that Aila is enduring torment at the hands of her grandmother, her sister was actually adopted by some influential Snezhnayan official who is somehow also in possession of the SAMPO mill. And it seems the original Holy Lady who killed herself had borne a child before that deadly encounter with Rotwang's men. A young son who was now an orphan who proposed the dream of Elysium even as a child, leading to Nodkrai becoming what it is today. That child was Reed Miller, making him a Hyperborean of exceptional purity. Somehow, he and Solveig of Snezhnaya were childhood best friends, and eventually, all four of these special children would cross paths. Reed Miller is such a legend amongst the people of Nodkrai and Snezhnaya, either as the Robin Hood for the poor or the insufferable thorn in the side of the rich. He was known to have been as beautiful as the Fae and an uncanny master of disguise. Officials tried to have him killed many times, and it is said that after one such attempt, he began to wear a mask, though no one knows if it's because his face was marred or because his face has simply become too recognizable. He believed wholeheartedly in the redistribution of both wealth and power from the rich and the gods, worshipping no one. He scorned the system as it was, and his childhood dream of an Elysium free of all that disparity was the wish that made his friend Solveig push for Nodkrai's autonomy from the north when he got the opportunity. So it was that, as a young man, Reed Miller founded the Treasure Hoarders, who were originally to steal on behalf of the poor and redistribute it. Now, to be clear, Reed Miller hated the gods, but the people of Nodkrai and Snezhnaya were said to have loved their Tsar, master of all Fae, who sent the noble Fae to protect the common folk way out there. A stern but benevolent father, so unlike the cold Tsaritsa. In fact, when the Tsar died in the Cataclysm and power passed to her, many of the Fae, including Flins, found the state of court unpalatable now and left. Many of her subjects, hundreds of years after the change, would still pray to the dead Tsar rather than the Tsaritsa. But still, Tsar or not, Reed Miller believed that the poor deserved better. So, one of his most famous heists is supposedly stealing the SAMPO mill from the governor's mansion. Rumor has it, the greedy Fae official was using the silver blood of a holy lady to power it. That silver-blooded girl was his adopted daughter, and very likely Alia, the runaway twin. Reed Miller supposedly managed to steal her heart as well, running off with the lady and the treasure. And now, everyone is trying to find the 5 clues he left behind, the proof of cognoscentes that will lead them to his great treasure, which I think will be the SAMPO mill itself. And only the traveler will be able to activate it, being a descender. Now, I feel like I have to justify this one because it seems unlikely, but the clues are very descriptive. You all can let me know if you agree after this. First major clue. With the unblessed birth of a prophesied son, a millennia-long plan ushered in a bleak twilight. A scheme born of cunning was shattered by foolish betrayal. The youth who was supposed to be king took the maid who was supposed to serve him and stole the secret treasure that was supposed to be his. only to reject the crowns that fate had ordained for him. In time, the king who was destined to rule Elysium went down in history as an unpardonable thief. And by the time the true new moon shone upon the land, the far north's final wish of golden grandeur had already been buried by a priestess who had never believed in any god, in the empty grave of her king. Second major clue is from Aila's notes. Even if blank had borne the sacred heir as foretold, and not the man who abducted my sister, the one who should have been our sovereign would only have created even greater chaos in Snezhnaya. See what I mean? An unpardonable thief is who stole the SAMPO mill, and it says the one who stole the mill was always meant to have it. And we know the heir is who was meant to have it. Then we have Aila saying that the woman who was meant to bear the heir instead gave birth to someone who abducted Alia. Plus, basically the whole second volume of the Legends of Reed Miller, in a sensational manner, details how the girl he kidnapped was the governor's adopted daughter with silver blood, just like a high-level Hyperborean. It all fits too well. Separately, they don't make sense, but taken all together along with bits and pieces from the Cognoscentes and the Silken Moon artifact set, it almost isn't a theory anymore, but proven. Which would mean that the head of the treasure hoarders was a Hyperborean prince. I know, crazy, right? But maybe that's how he was able to become such a powerful visionary of a thief, whose charisma lived on long after he died. Now, we haven't been given all the details of this next meeting yet, but at some point before killing Lovia, but after her sister ran away, Aila met Solveig, a Snezhnayan officer and noble of the Nightingale House, who was in Nodkrai, seemingly to take down Rotwang the Mad Monk. He ended up meeting Aila and impressing her with his good heart, but when he asked her for her help, perhaps to track down Rotwang, Lovia instructed Aila to kill him. However, that command was the first one that Aila disobeyed, and instead stabbed her wicked grandmother in the back, killing her once and for all. She ended up giving Solveig help that would decide the course of the cataclysm in Nodkrai. In fact, if she had followed her grandmother's command, Nodkrai may not have existed today. The darkness swept across Nodkrai, destroying almost everything, and Rotwang had something to do with it. According to Solveig's letter to Aila, her sister Alia sacrificed herself to help take down Rotwang, but he had already caused great damage. Aila lent Solveig some of the powerful dragon tech that had been given to the Frostmoon Scions centuries ago, called the Arrow of Terpikaranas, rumored to be the legendary bow and arrow that Nibelung made that could solidify moonlight straight into a crystal that could purge the darkness. In fact, the sanctuary where the Frostmoon Scions often sought refuge until Aila sealed it away was dragon tech as well. I can't confirm yet whether the massive pillar itself isn't the arrow, but what I do know is that the Scions did learn how to replicate and miniaturize the tech, and it seems to be the basis for the Lightkeepers' lanterns in present-day Nodkrai. That's why they are more effective at driving away the abyss than anything besides Aino's Kuvaki cannon. Solveig mentions the tech in his letter thanking Aila for all her help. As for the Arrow of Terpikaranas you mentioned in your last letter, if it truly holds the power to dispel the pitch-black calamity, and if you are willing to share it with such selflessness, then on behalf of the people of Nodkrai, please accept my deepest gratitude. Should, as you foresee, Rotwang indeed rise again from the pitch-black filth, then our successors, an order I am considering naming the Lightkeepers, in honor of the flame you have kindled, will stand ready to vanquish the threat once more, armed with the technology you have so generously gifted us. Notice here how he mentions that Rotwang was foretold to rise from the filth again. Just keep imagining Rerir and in a minute I'll explain the clues. In the meantime, there was a Nodkrai to rebuild, one who had earned the right to govern themselves. Solveig the Nightingale, whose family had once been personally recognized by the Tsar for outstanding performance, founded the Lightkeepers and built their headquarters on the ruined castle of Pyramida to the north, a symbol of pride amongst all the wreckage left from the abyss. The unique light of the lanterns they carried had given them an edge in the battle, an edge that Snezhnaya overall needed. Because when the calamity hit, Snezhnaya did not have the forces to protect the borderlands. It seems when the Tsar died, all Snezhnayan forces were called back, leaving the people of Nodkrai to suffer horribly in this land that the darkness was actually originating from. Like I said, it seems Rotwang actually opened the gates of hell. But the Lightkeepers managed, thanks to the dragon tech Aila gave them. Solveig therefore made a deal and an oath with the Tsaritsa. The Lightkeepers of the Borderlands would stand as an impenetrable force in Nodkrai against the darkness no matter what it cost them, so that the abyss would not pass into Snezhnaya. And in return, the Tsaritsa and her Fatui were to leave Nodkrai alone to govern itself. They would always remain loyal to the motherland, but Nodkrai had earned the right to autonomy. The Tsaritsa agreed. And finally, after Reed Miller had died via guillotine, and Nodkrai had suffered a devastating reset at the hands of the Abyss, his dream of an Elysium, free from the hand of the gods, was coming true. The last of those 4 special children, Aila, the first Moonchanter now, witnessed the birth of a new god. The new moon, or Welkin moon, she had foreseen years ago, that, had her grandmother just believed in, none of all her evil needed to have happened. They hadn't needed to produce a sacred heir. All they had to do was wait until the unbroken palace of the Frostmoon gave birth to a new moon goddess. Aila completely reformed everything to do with the Frostmoon science, abolishing their old prayers and shifting their focus to the new moon, as we can see in the hymns of the far north. Of course, the Damselette was born on this side of the false sky, cut off from her source of power. But she was a goddess to her people all the same until she left them because of their greed and selfishness, joining the Fatui to help them in their Kuvaki research, which is still extremely important. After all, Kuvaki is an energy that was around before the primordial one, having come from Nibelung's moons. If something is going to be able to take him down, it will probably be that. Imagine how powerful the Damselette may become if the false sky could get out of her way, and she could resonate with her true power source. The consequences could be devastating. But that also brings us to near present-day Nodkrai, and the awakening of both Rerir and Flins, which are both important. So, let us compare Rotwang, the Conrian obsessed with the moons and the abyss, and Rerir, the Conrian obsessed with the moons and the abyss. It is said that Rotwang found what he was looking for in Nodkrai, and we know he was looking for a gate to the abyss. The artifact set that has his story is called Night of the Skies Unveiling. And I have mentioned in a past video that I think the shattering of the false sky was a feature of the cataclysm. What if he found a weak spot in Nodkrai and literally opened the doorway to the abyss? The artifact set describes how he supposedly died afterwards too, and it somewhat correlates with Rerir's death. In the end, even that pretentious lunatic could not break free of the celestial shell, and was consumed by the bedeviled sky at the edge of delusion. The Damselette says that Rerir died when he fell into the moon's reflection, which sounds similar. And this artifact set describes how the abyss resurged in Nodkrai in recent times, now known as the Wild Hunt, because they were looking for something. The pieces of Rerir's body, perhaps. That's what he said, right? He's been looking for the pieces of his smithereened body for years. At the same time, Rotwang was foretold to rise from the filth in later days. The battles that occurred since Rerir's, possibly Rotwang's, resurgence are what has decimated the Lightkeeper numbers so badly of late. And one such battle is what woke Flins, the powerful blue flame fae, from his self-imposed exile. Only for him to go looking for shinies and start collecting Rerir's heart. When Kirill Chudamirovich Flins set off on the train out of Snezhnaya, most fae were still reeling from the death of the Tsar. And in the theories section, I'm going to explain why all this and other clues in Flynn's character story have me doubting that the Tsaritsa, that most people fear rather than love, is the foolish girl who was destined to marry the third descender. Flins made the decision that life as it wasn't particularly worth living after certain losses and the changes at court. After an elaborate ritual, he transformed himself into his blue fire form and sank into the earth on Final Cemetery Island, intending to sleep for eternity. But when the master of the Wild Hunt woke up, sending his undead fiends across the sky, even blotting out the sun for a time, the Lightkeepers were decimated on Final Cemetery Island. As most of them fell to their deaths, by pure accident, the complicated key to waking that legendary fae from sleep was fulfilled. He's been the most powerful force in the Lightkeepers for the past few years, keeping back Rerir while at the same time drawing his attention. Until Rerir became too strong for him, of course. Now, you tell me if Rerir and that mad monk don't sound at least astonishingly similar. Even the cape he wears looks like it might belong to such a guy. Now, as long as this video has become, I still need to talk about Hymns of the Far North. The book is just too informative, and I've already announced that I'm going against the general consensus in the lore community about who the third descender was meant to marry, so might as well explain myself. Stick around if you want to hear my crazy theories. Now, I've told you about my theories for Rerir and Reed Miller. Let's talk about Asmoday, Ajax, the Tsar and the Tsaritsa, and the Gate of Pohjola. Asmoday is missing from the book, when she shouldn't be. Hopefully you've already read it or found someone who read it to you, because we have to get straight to the important bits. Each of these prayers is about a noteworthy deity, right? Nibelung, the primeval blacksmith, whose throne was stolen from him. The primordial one, whose real name being revealed in Before Sun and Moon, is probably why Orobashi was killed. Koitar and Seutervoinen, the rebels. Sirelainen, the good-hearted third descender. And the mothers. Time, space, and life. Yet there should be 4. Since we now know that Asmoday is missing from the Meeting of Shades, and she is forbidden to be talked about, it stands to reason that she's been wiped from Irminsul too. But again, why? What did she do that she wasn't supposed to? If we look at what the hymn for each shade is saying, you'll realize something. Each of the concepts of the world that they represent is still running perfectly fine. Babies are still being born. Everything still dies. Time is flowing just as it should, as far as we know. But what about space? What was Asmoday supposed to oversee that is falling apart with her absence? Is it the weakened boundaries? That's what Alice said. More things have been getting in of late. The Welkin Moon event and Lama's best in slot weapon say that the world isn't sheltered by eternity anymore, and Rotwang said the world was destined for ruin anyway. I'm pretty sure whatever system the Primordial One was using to keep Tevat in a perpetual cycle is broken, so it's probably on its last samsara. Does this have anything to do with Asmoday's absence? I think it does, but we need more info. Now as it is, apparently no one could tell the traveler who that unknown god is, because even though the archons know about the shades, if she's been wiped from Irminsul, they will have forgotten too. Just like Rukkhadevata. And maybe that's because she hid their ship? Or else through her, then the true fate of the Abyss Twin will be revealed, which is very much in question right now. There's umpteen number of reasons why she could be being hidden from everyone's knowledge. I'm certain that the reason the traveler was able to meet their sibling from outside of the ship, seemingly without leaving in the first place, is because they were abducted by Conria first, ported out of their ship, and memory wiped in the Perrin-Harry orphanage. If you check out my Conria video, I go in much more detail about that theory, and I think it fits. Okay, now, you all may have been hearing in other places that original Ajax is Seralainen, the third descender. And I agree, for a couple specific reasons. We know Tartaglia's dad named him after a great warrior and hero who is known as Snezhnaya, named Ajax. And we've had a few pieces of lore about him too. The biggest clue for me is from Narcissan Cruz, all the way back in Fontaine. The mad genius who was trying to discover how to become a descender, so he could have editing privileges for the world like the Traveler. He was studying a tragedy called Ajax, to specifically learn how to become a primordial human. Then, second is the fact that the Ballad of the Ford's Weapon, which talks about him distinctly, mentioned that he saw Hyperborea and was destined to be with a woman named Snegurochka, but lost each other because of the wicked changelings. Snegurochka is a figure from Russian legend who was said to be the daughter of Father Winter. Another name for Father Winter can actually be Pakaisuko, the guy who sent the young man to his death under the pretense of earning the daughter's hand in marriage. Sounds like the Tsar and his daughter. So it all fits, right? Why then do I say the daughter isn't the Tsaritsa? Couple of reasons. The daughter of a Tsar is not a Tsaritsa. That title is only reserved for the wife or widow of a Tsar. The daughter is called the Tsarevna. So fine, you may say. She became the Tsaritsa after her father died then. Perhaps, but not if her mother still existed. And according to Flynn's character story, 500 years ago, both a Tsar and his wife both existed. So it's much more likely to me for the Tsar's wife to have taken over from him when he died. What I think is that the Tsaritsa who is there right now is the original Tsaritsa, and her daughter is who this Snegurochka is. She might have lost her entire family due to these tragic events, making for a very bitter empress indeed. Furthermore, I highly doubt that the Tsaritsa is the foolish girl the book described, nor do I think she would be doing what she is just to revive her lost love. I think something so much scarier and so much deeper is what's happening. I think this gate of Pohjola and the fact that the primordial one was found in it is much more interesting. The gate of Pohjola in Finnish mythology is very often the gate to the underworld. And remember how Rotwang supposedly found the gateway to hell somewhere in Nodkrai? And it says that Seralainen galloped across Hisi Island to approach this gate, but found the primordial one inside. Now, I don't know about you, but that's making the primordial one seem very sus to me. It brings to mind the fact that the archons are named after demons and the shades. That Venti says Celestia is not a place where you would want to go. That the imagery of Celestia for when Vanessa went there in the manga shows a dangerous looking serpent. Even archon residue generates this dark serpent-like power. Then we remember the Gnostic hymn and the concept of Gnosticism, which includes the idea of the demiurge, who is very often depicted as the devil. So hear me out. What if, when Seutervoinen opened that gate, he found out that the one who has been ruling over this planet isn't the true god, but the demiurge, and that secret wasn't supposed to get out at all? As in, the devil is who is ruling Teyvat, masquerading as someone good, and Seutervoinen ended up revealing this. Maybe the information can't be waved away like in Irminsul either, because a descender did it. And now the Tsaritsa will stop at nothing and believes that no price is too high to overthrow him. She's been collecting individuals who have broken with him and doesn't even want them using his visions, instead giving them delusions. In short, I think the Tsaritsa has decided to take down the demiurge himself after finding out that's who they've been worshipping because of her husband's schemes that got the gate opened. Far-fetched? Maybe, but it seems plausible. We'll just have to wait and see what else is revealed as the story continues. Man, this one got long. And I didn't even get to talk about how the lost iridescent moon is probably the crimson moon of Conria, or how Nashatown was legendarily founded by a bunch of kids. We still don't know what the Hexen Circle's role in all this will be, or how powerful Varka must be if the powerful Azure Flame says he isn't even in the same class as the Blade of the North Wind, or what he wants with the moon. Discovering all the secrets this time was actually a lot of fun, and I really hope you guys enjoyed the story. Kudos to you all for making it all the way here. Happy Genshin anniversary, and good luck to anyone wishing for Flins. Like, share, subscribe, hype, and comment if you would be so kind. The YouTube chores keep piling up, I know, but it helps us creators out, so I really appreciate it. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.